Hey folks, welcome back. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. It's been just a little over a week since President Cyril Ramaphosa came to the United States for his visit to meet with President Trump. So what's been going on? Well, I've been asked this question by many viewers, and so I've decided to make a video specifically talking about the outcome now that it's been 8 days and growing since the visit of Ramaphosa. What transpired? Well, it's pretty obvious that the African National Congress, the Government of National Unity, had a propaganda campaign laid on before this thing ever even went forward. Their whole intent, from my perspective, was to sing for a domestic audience in South Africa, to convince them that all is well and that things are great with the United States, because no genuine effort was made to move the needle in a positive direction here in the United States. No trade representative remains behind from the South African delegation. No trade representative has come over here. There's no ambassador designate. The special envoy, Mcebisi Jonas, is still not here. So South Africa is not taking this relationship seriously. And in fact, it's much worse. They have a well-orchestrated propaganda campaign to mislead people into thinking that things went well. So they did three things I asked President Ramaphosa not to do. The first one, of course, was not to lecture President Trump. And that's exactly what he did when he interrupted the president and he lectured him. It will take the president listening to South Africans. That's not a good move. Also, I asked the government of South Africa not to try to bribe the U.S. government, because that's not going to fly. You honestly think that the guy in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, who's rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse in the U.S. government, is going to fall for a bribe to give a license to Starlink, which, by the way, has never even applied for a license, so it's just silly anyway. Offering rare earth elements, offering access to natural gas, and Starlink was a bribe. And that fell flat with the Trump administration. So that's two of the three things. And let's come back to that a little bit later, perhaps. But what have they done? Well-orchestrated propaganda campaign. They knew that regardless of the outcome here, they would have time behind closed doors and they would go back to South Africa and tell a story. The Daily Maverick has run one story claiming they have two sources from South Africa who were behind closed doors and one from the U.S. I find this improbable. The Trump administration has been especially tight-lipped about this visit. Normally by now there'd be some sort of leak or some sort of release. There's been no statements. There's been no release. Donald Trump was clearly angry, and it appears that the reason why the meeting started 30 minutes late, which I have not blamed on the South African government, apparently was Ramaphosa's fault. At least that's the word on the street. Trump was clearly annoyed that this meeting started 30 minutes late. That is not a good way to start your relationship with Donald Trump. This businessman, time is money. And Ramaphosa made him wait 30 minutes. Talk about cheek. Then he interrupted Trump. Talk about more cheek. Oh, I'll take this question. No, you won't take this question. You're the guest. If you want to take the question, you turn to your host and say, "Excuse me, Mr. President, do you mind if I take this question?" But he didn't do that. Didn't do that. And then, of course, he took the shovel out and dug his grave. But the propaganda campaign is at of course, a couple things. Number one, it's described as an ambush by U.S., South African media, and also the reporters from South Africa, both in the presser with Trump and his team, and in the afterwards when President Ramaphosa had his own presser, they asked puffball questions of Ramaphosa in the meeting afterwards, meant to prop him up when he was clearly rattled and shaken. He needed being propped up. And during the presser with President Trump, these questions were meant to put President Trump on the spot. One question from the South African was, "Do you still believe there's a white genocide?" To which Trump said, "I'm not convinced." That's what Trump said about white genocide. He said he wasn't convinced. Yet every South African newspaper and every journalist, so-called journalist in South Africa, keeps claiming that Trump was going on about a white genocide. He never talked about a white genocide. You're talking about a white genocide. He said he wasn't convinced. Why don't you report the facts? That's what he said. He didn't use the word genocide at all in that meeting. You did. You fake journalist in the U.S. and South Africa. And when the question was posed, what will it take for South Africa, for President Ramaphosa to do to convince you that there isn't a white genocide? That's when Ramaphosa rudely interrupted Trump and said, I'll take this question. It will take Trump listening. So, the ANC is declaring this a huge success. That's utter nonsense. It's utter rubbish. It's not nonsense. It's a disaster for South Africa. Number one, you didn't do anything to improve the situation. Trump made it painfully obvious that he wasn't even going to pressure you on things. You opened the door. You made the nonsense. He didn't push for abandonment of racist laws. He didn't push for any real issues related to ethnic minorities or racial minorities. Didn't ask for that. Didn't ask for any concessions. Not a single concession was requested from Trump in that meeting. The only thing he asked is, why don't you arrest that guy, Malema, for inciting violence? But Ramaphosa made his position clear when he returned to South Africa. We're not arresting anybody for singing that vile, racist song. We're not going to do that. You can sing that song. But God forbid you fly the Union flag, which represents the Union of South Africa, which predates the apartheid regime by, 38 years? But apparently, because you're not bright enough to make the distinction between the National Party's apartheid era and the Union of South Africa, it's a hate symbol. What a crock of nonsense. What a crock of nonsense. So the ANC is busy declaring this a huge success. That's utter nonsense. Now, the other questions I was asked about this is, what happened behind closed doors? That's the first one. So let me address these 3 points. What happened behind closed doors? Well, we don't know. The Trump administration is tight-lipped, and the South Africans are lying, saying things went well. Really? Where are the agreements? Where's the progress? Where's your trade representative? What progress are you making? Nothing. All they can talk about is pre-planned talking points they had to bribe the U.S. by giving Starlink a license, which isn't happening. And then it went well, and the door is open. Well, the door might be open, but not because you perform well, because Trump is magnanimous. So, that's behind closed doors. We don't know. Still waiting to find out. What is the status of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act? Well, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, is a dead letter issue. Congress' term expires. The fiscal year ends 30 September. There's no legislation I'm aware of in the House of Representatives, a bill to renew AGOA, or in the Senate. It would originate in the House normally. If the bill isn't introduced and signed before 30 September, it expires, there's no more AGOA. This has nothing to do with South Africa. South Africa technically is not even legally eligible for AGOA because it's abrogated property rights with zero compensation, which is theft of land. By introducing that measure into the parliament in 2018, South Africa abrogated its agreement to abide by AGOA, a key tenet of which is respecting property rights. You're not respecting property rights when you give somebody nothing in exchange for taking their land. That's not compensation. Nil means zero. Compensation means giving someone something of value for what you get from them. When you take someone's land, you give them nothing, nil, zero. That's not compensation. That's legalized theft. No different than the National Party evicting people from District 6. You're just as big a land thieves. So AGOA is dead letter. Forget about it. And sanctions against South African individuals, either in the ANC or leaders in the government of national unity. There's been no talk about this. The only talk about this is coming from South Africa for the most part. There have been a few American politicians who've talked about this, Nell in Texas and Ronnie Jackson, considering applying these things. But those are pieces of legislation that are floating around the House and not really going anywhere. Trump has never mentioned sanctions. He never mentioned travel restrictions, never mentioned embargo, never mentioned any sanctions. The only thing Trump has done is suspend gifts. We don't give you $500 million a year anymore because you lied. And because you rubbish the United States, you act against our interests. We'd just be stupid if you keep crapping and pissing on our leg and we give you $500 million, which is what we've been for 30 years. Stupid. Giving money to South Africa while it rubbished our national security and our national interests, as well as our friends, partners, and allies. So there are no sanctions. Will there be any? I don't know. I don't work in the Trump administration. I'm a private citizen, a retired colonel. Don't work for the U.S. government at all. So I don't have an answer on that. But I know a lot of South Africans are holding out hope that leaders in the government will be sanctioned for their actions. I'll tell you one thing. I don't know for certain, but I'm pretty confident that Julius Malema probably has an outstanding arrest warrant for threatening the life of Donald Trump back in March or April, whenever it was he did it. I'd recommend he not leave the country. He says he's not afraid of Trump, but let's see him come to America. See how long he walks the streets before he's in handcuffs. Go to Spain. It's an extradition treaty country with the United States. Enjoy your Costa Brava vacation, as short as it may be. Anyway, that's the situation, folks. That's an update on what's going on 8 days after the meeting. Nothing. The ANC has gone back to its old ways. The racial discrimination still exists in South Africa. Crime is still rampant. They're still murdering people and attacking people on farms. A dear friend of mine's parents were assaulted and beaten savagely near Brits just 3 nights ago. Nothing has changed. It will take external pressure. The ANC has made it clear they don't care about South Africans. They only care about caters and about their craven political power, self-interest, and self-aggrandizement. That's all they care about. Show me otherwise. What say you, South Africa? What say you, world? Cheers.